Something happened this week that caught absolutely everyone off guard. I'm talking about a shift so subtle, so quiet, that not even the people in her inner circle saw it coming. There was no dramatic phone call from the tournament directors, no last-minute wildcard plea, no special favor pulled by Federation officials. It was just a name, appearing quietly on a digital entry list, almost without warning. And yet, that single line of text changed everything. Why does one name on a draft sheet matter so much? Why are pundits and fans alike calling this the exact moment Alex stopped being an underdog and started being a contender? And perhaps more importantly, if this is such incredible news, why does it also feel like the beginning of something far more dangerous for her career? Stick with me, because by the time we finish this deep dive, you will understand exactly why insiders are whispering that Washington could either cement her legend or completely expose her to the harsh light of reality. Let's rewind for a second. Let's go back to before any of this made sense. Back to a version of Alex that most casual tennis fans never really got to see. There was a time, not that long ago, when every major tournament she played came with a catch. She needed permission. She needed someone in a suit, sitting in an office somewhere, to decide that she deserved a chance. Wild cards, invitations, favors pulled by federations who believed in her potential, but couldn't yet prove it with hard numbers. And here is the uncomfortable truth that nobody in the tennis world likes to say out loud. Wild cards are a gift, yes, but they are also a cage. They tell the world you are talented, absolutely. But they also whisper something quieter underneath. Something that says you aren't quite there yet. Every time Alex walked onto a court with a wild card next to her name, there was an invisible asterisk floating above her head. Would she have earned this spot on her own merit? Could she really compete at this level? Or was she just borrowing a stage that belonged to someone else? She heard those questions, maybe not spoken aloud in the locker room, but she felt them. Athletes always feel the doubt hiding behind polite applause, so she did the only thing that could silence it completely. She got better, not slightly better, not a lucky streak kind of better. She rebuilt pieces of her game one by one, quietly, methodically, in gyms and on practice courts where nobody was filming. Slowly, almost without the tennis world noticing at first, the numbers started shifting. Her ranking crept up, then it climbed, and then this year, it exploded in a way that even her own team seemed stunned by. And somewhere in the middle of that meteoric rise came Wimbledon, the tournament that fundamentally changed how people said her name. Before Wimbledon, casual fans knew her as a name buried deep in bracket previews, a player you might skip over while looking for the big seeds. After Wimbledon, she was a headline. Picture it for a second. Grass, the most unforgiving surface in tennis, the one that punishes hesitation and rewards absolute conviction. She walked out against players who had trophy cabinets full of silverware she hadn't even dreamed of yet. Players with entire fan bases built over a decade of consistency. And instead of freezing, instead of playing it safe the way a teenager with everything to lose usually does, she attacked. She swung freely. She took risks that made commentators lean forward in their seats, holding their breath. And point by point, match by match, something remarkable happened. The crowd stopped watching her as an outsider and started watching her as a threat. That shift, small as it might sound, is enormous in professional sports. There is a massive difference between being liked and being feared. Alex had just crossed that line live on one of the biggest stages tennis has to offer. But here is where the story gets more interesting, and frankly, more complicated. Because success like that always comes with a price nobody warns you about. The better you get, the higher the expectations climb. And the higher the expectations climb, the smaller your margin for error becomes. A month ago, if Alex lost early in a tournament, people shrugged and said, she's still young, still learning, still building her game. Now, after Wimbledon, after the ranking surge, after her name started trending in group chats across the Philippines and around the globe, a first-round loss doesn't get shrugged off anymore. It gets dissected, it gets turned into a headline of its own, a very different, much darker kind of headline. That is the quiet danger hiding underneath all this excitement. And it is exactly why what just happened in Washington matters so much more than a simple entry list update. Because Alex didn't get an invitation to the Mubadala City DC Open. She didn't need a favor. She didn't need anyone's approval. Her ranking alone punched the door open, and she walked straight through it as a fully qualified competitor. Let that sink in for a moment. This is one of the toughest stops on the entire American hardcourt swing. It is a tournament that historically stacks its draw with major champions, top 10 killers, and the kind of dangerous, unpredictable veterans who have nothing left to prove and everything to gain by upsetting a rising star. In other words, this isn't a stage built for comfort. This is a stage built to test exactly how real her rise actually is. And that brings us to the question everyone is quietly asking, but almost nobody wants to say directly. Is Alex ready for this? Not ready in the sense of talent, because at this point, that argument is basically settled. Ready in the sense of pressure, expectation, and the brutal, unforgiving spotlight that comes with being seen as the next big thing, instead of the next surprise story. There is a very specific kind of weight that lands on young athletes the moment the world stops asking if they can compete and starts assuming they will win. It is a different kind of pressure entirely, heavier, quieter, and far more psychological than anything she has faced before. Some players buckle under that shift. Others use it as fuel. Nobody, including the people closest to Alex, can say for certain which path she is about to take. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes Washington must-watch tennis. Think about how strange that journey actually is when you slow down and look at it honestly. Most players who reach this level grew up inside massive systems, surrounded by resources most young athletes never see. Coaches flown in from other continents, sponsors lined up before they even turned professional. Alex's path looked different. Hers was built on smaller courts, tighter budgets, and a country that hadn't produced a name like hers on this stage in a very long time. Every single ranking point she has ever earned came without the safety net that so many of her rivals grew up with. That context matters because it means the confidence she carries onto a court in Washington isn't inherited. It isn't manufactured by a system designed to produce champions. It was built brick by brick through matches most people never watched, in cities most tennis fans couldn't find on a map, and that is exactly why this next chapter feels different from anything that came before it. This isn't a story about talent finally being noticed. It is a story about talent finally being tested at the level it always deserved to be tested at. And there is no way to know in advance how a young athlete responds the first time the entire tennis world turns its full attention toward her at once. Some rise to meet that gaze. Some feel it close in around them like a weight they didn't expect. Nobody, not even Alex herself, can say for certain which version shows up in Washington until the first ball actually gets struck. And that uncertainty, uncomfortable as it is precisely what makes this moment feel less like a routine tournament entry and more like a genuine crossroads in a young career. Let's talk about who she will actually be facing, because this isn't some soft, forgiving draw designed to ease a rising star into the deep end. This is one of the strongest fields the tournament has seen in years. Grand Slam winners will be in that draw. Players who have already lived through the exact kind of pressure Alex is only just beginning to understand. Established veterans who know every trick in the book, who can slow a match down, speed it up, disrupt rhythm, and exploit even the smallest crack in a younger player's composure. And then there are the dangerous ones. The players ranked just outside the spotlight who have absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain by taking down a name that is suddenly on everyone's radar. That is the brutal math of tennis. The moment you become someone worth beating, every single opponent walks onto the court a little more motivated than usual. So why, despite all of that pressure, all of that danger, does there seem to be so much quiet confidence surrounding Alex heading into this tournament? Maybe it is because of what people who have actually watched her closely keep repeating. She doesn't shrink against bigger names. If anything, something shifts in her game when the opponent across the net is more experienced, more decorated, more intimidating on paper. Her footwork gets sharper. Her shot selection becomes more aggressive, not less. And that composure, the one that made Wimbledon so unforgettable, doesn't seem to fade under bright lights. It seems to sharpen. That is rare. That is the kind of trait coaches spend years trying to build into athletes and can never fully manufacture. It either exists in someone or it doesn't. And every match this year has suggested it exists in her. But confidence alone doesn't win matches at this level. Preparation does. Physical conditioning does. And most importantly, mental discipline across 3 grueling sets against opponents who will specifically target her weaknesses does. Which raises another layer of tension to this entire story. Hard courts are not grass. The rhythm is different. The bounce is different. The demands on the body are different. Wimbledon proved she can thrive on a surface built for aggression and instinct. Washington will test something else entirely. Whether she can adapt, whether her game translates, whether the version of Alex that stunned the tennis world weeks ago can evolve fast enough to conquer an entirely new challenge. And if she does, if she manages to navigate this field and produce even one signature win against a ranked veteran or a recognizable name, the story shifts again, instantly, into something even bigger. Because a win like that wouldn't just be a good result on a stat sheet. It would be proof, undeniable public proof, that Wimbledon wasn't a lucky moment in the spotlight. It was the arrival of a genuine contender. There is another piece of this puzzle that almost nobody talks about, and it might actually be more important than any single opponent she draws. It is what happens away from the court, in the hours nobody films. The hotel room silence before a match against a player she has only ever watched on television. The locker room, where seasoned veterans move with a calm that only comes from having done this hundreds of times before, while a younger player is still learning how to breathe through the nerves. Tennis is often described as a lonely sport, and there is a brutal truth hiding in that description. When Alex walks out for her first match in Washington, there will be no teammates to lean on mid-point, no timeout to regroup with a coach whispering instructions, just her, the ball, and whatever she is carrying inside her in that exact moment. That kind of isolation either forges mental toughness or exposes cracks nobody knew were there. And the players she is about to face have spent years learning how to exploit exactly those cracks. Drawing out a rally just a few seconds longer than comfortable, changing the pace of a match just enough to disrupt rhythm, testing patience point after point until something breaks. It is a quiet, almost invisible war being fought underneath the one everyone can see on the scoreboard. This is the part of professional tennis that never makes it into highlight reels, but decides far more matches than raw talent ever could. And it is the exact battlefield Alex is about to step onto, fully exposed, fully accountable, with absolutely nowhere left to hide behind a wild card or a low-pressure expectation anymore. Let's step back for a second and talk about what this actually means beyond the scoreboard. Because there is something happening here that goes far deeper than rankings and trophies. Somewhere in the Philippines right now, there is a kid picking up a racket for the first time who has never once thought about representing their country on a global stage. And after watching Alex, that thought is starting to form. There are teenagers grinding through early mornings at local courts who used to dream small,